Good evening, everyone. This is Professor Chisholm, and I wanted to go over the CSS grid assignment with you all, just so that you can see what I am looking for as I'm going through your projects, okay? So first off is it's paying attention to the details, okay? So let's look at this. So the thing is to really the whole point of this assignment was also, yes, we wanted to get grids, correct? Yes, but we also were trying to pay attention to how the grids, how the assets were lined up in the material. So it's really just paying attention to these little details here. As graphic designers, this is something that we really have to pay attention to, okay? Now, I sort of caution some of you guys, look at your text, because if we really look at this, and even the one I have isn't quite right, because honestly it looks like one big paragraph here. But notice the one is lined up. The title of the article is lined up. So one is lined up with the top here, okay? And then the second part is, so you really had free reign in terms of how you laid out the rest of the images, and then I'm okay with it, but I did say that you had to have these other elements in there. But the other thing is this paragraph. So look how it's not in a standard paragraph. So some of it's justified right, some of it's justified left. And so let's take a look at that. So the result is, so this is my version. So notice that the image is centered. So it's nice and centered. So I have equal distance here, left and right. The whole article is centered in the middle of the page. One, it's centered at the top. Technically, I'm not sure. I think that this still needs to be closer, because if you look at the original, but I'll accept that with a single, but it is nice and clean. And heads up, I mean, actually it lays out exactly the way it is in terms of that article, in terms of how the lines are. So if we go, New York is, let's look at this. So heads up is the last two here, but that's okay. All right, so let's go back into that. All right, so this is lined up properly, and then if you notice, there's the staggered text here on this secondary page. And there's those two other elements that I said that you also needed to have, okay? So you were supposed to add these other elements. Whether or not you added them at the red circle, I didn't add it at the top, but I did have the two closing elements at the bottom. But notice my text is staggered, okay? And let's go ahead and look. So clearly my web page is centered in my frame. And I'm not, I'm just looking overall looking for cohesion, unity, to make sure that it makes sense, what you guys did, okay? So let's look at the CSS, and where is not my CSS, but let's look, well, we'll look at both in a second here. So the HTML, I have a whole bunch of div classes, right? Divs. Between class and IDs. So there's I put my images in figures, right? And there is my first text with just in paragraphs, regular paragraphs. Now, and then we have the right copy, and this is where we are using spans to help us, right? Red, span class red to help get the red so that I can pull that into my CSS. And then we have, if you look how I handled the bottom paragraph, is we did left justify, right justify, left justify, class spans. Again, spans, and then again we have our images in figures, and there we have it. Okay, so then yeah, so the images are in figures, and then when we go into the CSS, and that is not for this project. It looks like that is Flexbox. Let me open up that. I wonder why it did not open. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. And we have our wrapper container. We do display grid, and then I talk about I tell exactly what I'm doing here. So we're doing 3, and I'm getting that all identified and set up here. And then there's my top copy. Remember? So we used a lot of different div tags, classes, and IDs. And so we have, and I've got remember I said it's columns within columns. Grid columns within columns is how we do this, okay? So grid columns within columns. Oh, come back here. Calling up an H1 tag. Then this is the second paragraph, which is on the second page. So this is the top. And then we have our right copy. And then this is the bottom copy, second paragraph. Remember, if you put your comments in, it helps you. So we're doing left justify, we're floating left, right justify, we're floating right, so that we can get it staggered, so that it looks like, so we can get that staggered look. There's our span for the red type, right? And then we have our images, image A, B, C, D, and then we're going into the rectangular and the circle, okay? Yeah, so that is what I'm looking for. So, and there's multiple ways to use a grid system. I am not saying that what I did is the definitive way. I'm just telling you what I am looking for ultimately as I'm grading through these assignments, okay? All right, guys, let me go ahead and get that all done so that I can get everything set up, get things set into you. Just wanted to make sure you knew what I'm looking for, okay? All right. Have a great week. Do great things.